I've always been a passionate advocate of what LandAid stands for. And as the chairman of LandAid, I intend to carry on doing that, perhaps a little less strutting and more passionate advocacy. So you will certainly be hearing a lot from me, because I will be trying to persuade you to support our brilliant cause, a cause that is just so worthwhile, because it's actually about playing a big part in saving a generation. And if we don't do it...
So here it is. This is the total value of UK housing stock. It's £5.75 trillion. That is more than the GDP of France and Germany and Italy put together. More than half of that is located currently in conservative constituencies. Those conservative constituencies have 61% of the value of owner-occupied housing. On the flip side, Labour constituencies have 48% of the value of social housing. And from that basis, you start to see why might it be difficult and why might there be divisions in terms of getting a coordinated housing policy.
But I also think that we aren't beginning to be imaginative enough. Maybe this is because I'm addressing a group of building developers. But when you look at, for example, our failure to actually modernise certain kinds of building into, for example, blocks of flats, when you look at the way in which we built offices that are empty, which could be converted, when you look at the way that some cities have, for example, taken old industrial buildings and made them into wonderful places to live, the warehouses of Liverpool, the mills of Berkeley and so on. I mean, they're place after place I've seen. And then I look at, not just at London, a lot of cities here, and what you see is large areas of basically drab housing which have not been changed. Well,
there's far too much democracy, and what I mean by that is the current system is seriously flawed. What it means is that when an area is clearly capable of being developed, and ought to be developed because housing need in this city is scandalously massive, then a relatively few councillors, doesn't matter what their political persuasion is, can, actually influenced no doubt by an equally few voters, actually turn down applications which ought simply to go through.
Now, democracy, too much democracy, that is absolutely ludicrous. This has nothing to do with the planning system. This is about the fact that, for example, in London, 2/3 of new homes are bought by investors. Where does that leave people who want to live here and work here?
You know, I'm a Hull MP, I'm not a London MP. And what I find out in the East Riding is local councils have a housing plan. It's been developed through democracy, through the elected local authority. It's been developed in accordance and in consultation with local population, and then it's held up time and time again by activists who don't you know, it is classic NIMBYism.
Who would you not go with? That's
an easier question.
UKIP and the Tories. I just don't think it would work. I mean, a Conservative Labour coalition. You know, me and Stephen could be, we'd be all right.
You see, when reasonable chaps like you and me get together, Alan, we could sort the whole thing out.
And it's worked, some local authorities have had.
And it's worth saying, it works in Germany. Yeah. Whereas, you know, Mrs. Merkel's coalition goes right the way across the board. Could it work here? No, you're quite right. We're too deeply entrenched for at least the next generation. I don't think that really could work.
Okay, so for the Tories, it's not Labour.
Not Labour.
Not Greens.
No, I mean, I don't see the question. You see, I think what's going to happen is that I think we won't have a coalition government. I don't think we'll have an outright majority for any of the two major parties. I think we're much more likely to have a minority government supported on a confidence and supply basis by a number of the smaller parties.
It's also very hard for Labour, it seems to me, to get into a coalition with the SNP.
Absolutely.
When the SNP is its major challenger in Scotland.
Absolutely.
And where Scotland is, as it were, the crown jewel for Labour, or has been for years. I actually think there's going to be a hell of a problem about finding anybody will live and work with. And we're going to be rather desirable as the one party where people could actually live and work with us.
But again, going into the next government, Greens are not going to go into a coalition with anyone. We won't do a confidence and supply either. We think that working with the Tories would be almost impossible. So we would slightly favour a Labour attempt at some sort of rainbow get-together.